Okay guys, today we're going to talk about percent of change. So we need to know the formula for percent of change, which is taking your new value and subtracting your old value and then dividing by the old value. So I like to call this new minus old over old. We do percent of change when we're asked to find two things. So if we're asked to find the percent, we are doing this new minus old over old. We could also be asked to find that n part of the formula, and we'll talk about that in the second part of our notes today. Okay, so to find the percent, that first thing that they could ask us for, we're going to use that percent of change formula. So again, that's n minus o over o, no, right? You're going to then take whatever answer you get, positive or negative, and multiply it by 100. So you're going to multiply that answer by 100, and then you interpret that answer based on if you have a negative percent or a positive percent. So when you get your answer, it will say negative 25.2%. That means it decreased 25.2%, or a positive represents increase. Okay, so let's go ahead and try two examples. So the first example says a sporting goods store has all skates on sale. The original price is $45, the sales price is $30, find the percent of change. So the hardest thing about this is identifying what was new and what was old. So when we're talking about this, old is the original price because that's not how much you're paying right now, that's how much you would have paid before. Sales price represents the new price because they're on sale now. So then we're going to write our n minus o over o formula. The new was 30 minus the old was 45 over the old was 45. So we do our subtraction first, and we do 30 minus 45 in our calculator, and we get negative 15 over 45. We use that as division, so we do negative 15 divided by 45, and we get negative 0.3 repeating. Don't clear that out of your calculator until you then multiply by 100. Because remember, you can't type in a repeating number, and you get negative 33.3 repeating percent. So to interpret that, we want to know, does that mean it increased 33.3 repeating percent or decreased? So we would say something like the price decreased because it was negative 33.3 repeating percent. All right, so example 2. Target had t-shirts on sale last week for $25. This week the t-shirts are $28. Find the percent of change, round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so when we're reading this, it says last week they were $25. So that means this has to be old because it's last week is older than this week. And then this week they're $28. That has to be new because this week is newer than last week. So we write our percent of change formula because it tells us to find the change. So it's n minus o over o. And then I substitute in my numbers. So my new is 28. My old was 25. So 28 minus 25 over 25. Type in the subtraction and we get a positive 3 over 25. And then we type in that division and we get 0.12. Again, don't clear it out until you multiply that answer by 100, and you get 12%. So because that's a positive 12, we're going to say the price or the cost increased by 12%. All right, so you're going to take a second and pause the video, and you're going to practice just finding the percent. So make sure that you go to the first link. You can show your practice on a separate sheet of paper or the whiteboard. All right, guys, I hope that went well. Let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to find the new value. So again, we're going to find the new value by setting up the percent of change formula. So that's n minus o over o. But then it's going to be equal to a percent ratio. So we're going to make that equal to a percent over 100, okay? We're going to substitute in our numbers after that. Remember, if you have a decrease, that's a negative percent. If the problem says increase, it's a positive percent. And then we'll solve the proportion for x, whatever the missing number is, which is typically the n, okay? So in this example, it says last year, 8th grade had 300 students. This year, the number increased by 26%. How many students are in 8th grade this year? So we're going to look at my first number, which says last year, it had 300 students. So we know that is the old, because it says this year the number increased by 26%, so that's a positive 26%. And they want to know how many students are in the grade this year, so that's my new. I'm missing my new because it says how many. So I'm going to take my percent of change formula, and I'm going to set it equal to a percent ratio. Remember, that's always a percent over 100. And then I'm going to plug in the numbers I know. I don't know my n, so I put x in place of that. I subtract my old number of students, which is 300. I put that over my old number of students, which is 300, and I set that equal to the percent ratio. So I take 26, which is positive, and put it over 100. Now what we're going to do is then take this proportion and solve this proportion. So we're going to cross multiply. Okay, because I'm multiplying 100 times this whole numerator, remember the fraction bar groups what is ever in the numerator and the denominator if there's multiple things. So we want to put grouping symbols around what's in the numerator since there's multiple things in there. And we're going to do 100 times what's in that grouping symbol. And then 300 from this denominator times 26. I go ahead and do that multiplication. I can do this one to start with. And I do 300 times 26, and I get 7,800. I set that equal to the 100 times x minus 300. And then I solve this equation like a multi-step equation. So we go back to our 6 steps. The first step is to keep change. So I would say x plus negative 300. Then I look at distributing. So I'm going to distribute the 100 to both parts. I get 100x plus negative 30,000 equals 7,800. Then I get rid of my constant first. So the negative 300 or negative 30,000, I can make a positive 30,000. You could also do minus a negative 30,000. You should get 100x is equal to 37,800. And we can take that equation over here and then solve for x by dividing both sides by 100. And we get x equals 378. So we say this year there are 378 students in 8th grade. All right, let's take a look at one more before we move on to practice. So students in flag football club decreased by 20% this year. So decreasing by 20%, we know that means it's a negative 20%. There are now 120 students. Okay, so now means current. That's actually our new number. It wants to know how many students were in the club last year. So how many students last year, that's my old number. So this time, they're actually asking for my old, which gets slightly more complicated. So we're going to write our formula, n minus o over o, and then we're setting that equal to a percent ratio. I know my new, which was 120 students. I don't know my old, so I have minus x over x because they're both representing old. And then that equals negative 20 because it was a decrease over 100. and then we're gonna go ahead and solve that ratio, or that proportion. So again, we're gonna cross multiply, but we're gonna keep my numerator in parentheses since the fraction bar groups it. We've got 100 times 120 minus x equals negative 20 times x, because I set my cross products equal. I can simplify just by writing this as negative 20x is equal to 100 times 120 minus x, and then I solve it like a multi-step equation. So I'm going to distribute the 100, and I get 12,000 minus 100x is equal to negative 20x. Okay, then I need to move variables from one side to the other because I have two of them. I'm going to move the minus 100x by doing plus 100x. Also, by the way, in the beginning, if you wanted to do keep, change, you can totally do that. It's still going to result in what I'm getting right now. So we're adding 100x to both sides. I end up getting 12,000 is equal to 80x. I'm going to take that over here and finish up solving it. I do that by dividing both sides by 80. And I end up getting x is equal to 150. So when I'm giving the answer to this, it asks how many students were in the club last year. I say there were 150 students in the club last year. Okay, go ahead and try practicing finding either the new or the old value, and come prepared with questions the next time I see you.